cut the music. Can you cut the music? I'm so sorry. Has anybody seen Ben Wikler? He's the host of The Good Fight. I think he had his mic. Can you cue up his mic? I think he had his mic on him. Ben? Ben?
Lauren Ellen, is that you?
Ben, where are you?
I'm on the Good Fight blimp right now.
You have a blimp?
Well, technically it's a dirigible.
What?
Do you remember the 2012 London Olympics when James Bond jumped out of the helicopter with the Queen and came right into the opening ceremony?
No?
Yeah, that happened. It was awesome. And I was thinking about how that would be a really cool intro for the show, so I bought this dirigible and I went up, and I was thinking I would do that, but then I realized I've never actually skydived anywhere. So if you could ask everyone just to hang on for about an hour, and I will land the blimp, I'll get an Uber right over, it'll be great.
No, absolutely not. You need to be here now. You were actually supposed to be here like 6 minutes ago. We're running late.
I'm 15,000 feet above DC, Lauren Ellen.
Oh my God.
I don't really have another option. There's probably a closer dirigible landing pad to the convention center than the one I took off from.
No, Ben, you're gonna have to jump. I'm so sorry.
We have to
start right now.
I have to jump?
You have to jump.
Oh my goodness.
Jump, Ben.
Okay. All right. Okay. I'm gonna do it.
You can do this.
Okay.
Right? He can do this.
All right. Here I go. I'm jumping. Oh my God. I'm going faster than I've ever gone before. I'm falling through the air.
Are you okay?
Look at that. There's a flock of bald eagles right there. I'm gonna hit them. I got to get out of the way. Oh my God, and they're being chased by Dick Cheney's Predator drone as a symbol of the inability of the Republican Party to recognize the inextricably linked fates of humanity and the natural world.
Ben?
Okay, all right, I'm falling. I'm still okay. Lorna, where's the convention center?
Are you serious? Ben, it's on 7.
How do I find it? I didn't look on Google Earth first.
Where? Oh my God, Ben. How can we?
I'm getting closer. I think I'm about.
What can we do?
Can you make some noise or something?
Can we yell, guys? Maybe we can chant the good fight, and then he'll find us.
I
right?
can't hear anything. You got to turn it up, you guys.
Good fight.
Okay, I'm starting to hear it. I think I'm pointing in the right direction. Louder, please.
Good fight.
Okay, I'm getting close. Here I come. Oh my God.
You guys, I think he landed. Ben? Ben, are you here?
I just gotta adjust my cuffs here.
Okay.
Hey, everyone.
I'm glad you made it.
Thanks for guiding me into the landing here. Lauren Ellen McCann. Ladies and gentlemen, executive producer of The Good Fight. TheGoodFight.fm. It's powered by our sponsor and partner and friends at MoveOn.org. And we've always had this dream of doing it for people. Not just by the people, of the people, and for the people, but in front of and with the people. So, ladies and gentlemen, you are the people. And this is happening. We have an awesome show lined up for you today. We have first the story of Rootscamp itself with Jamie McGonigal, the resident hero and director of Rootscamp for the New Organizing Institute. A round of applause for Jamie, if we could. Then we have the Win Report. The Win Report is where we tally the wins and losses in progressive fights from coast to coast and around the world. And today we're joined by Garland Gilchrist II of MoveOn.org, the Win Report's traditional co-host, and Bridget Todd of the New Organizing Institute. Give it up for Bridget and Garland. Then we have the epic story of the day, which is the fight, one of the great fights really of our time. It's the fight against ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, which is the shadowy corporate-funded network that's behind such awful laws as stand your ground legislation, voter suppression bills, and a bazillion different types of, bad pro-tobacco, pro-oil, anti-humanity and natural world laws that have swept the country. They are on their heels now because of an incredible battle that's been spearheaded by a huge coalition, and at the heart of it, Color of Change. And we're joined by Rashad Robinson, the executive director of Color of Change, to tell us how they did it and how we are winning. So that will be amazing. Thank you to Rashad and the Color of Change team, Center for Media and Democracy, and Yellow Alioto from the network of states across the country that's working on this, have put something amazing together. So that's what's coming up. And before we begin, I would like to just very briefly welcome my son, Mac Wikler, who's wearing an octopus costume, to The Good Fight. Mackie.
And microphone.
Yeah. Is it a voice distorter?
The fight.
Yes. The fights. The fights. All right, Mac Wikler, ladies and gentlemen, round of applause, please.
A cracker.
Yes. Thank you for joining us, Mackie. Mac is 2. Mackie's 2.
Maggie's too.
And it's
Good fight.
good fight.
Good fight.
All right. So it's all of our job to make the world awesome. So when Mackie is our age, Roots Camp is basically just a storytelling session about the fights that were, as opposed to the fights that need to happen. And that is our intro. So I would like to welcome Jamie McGonigal, New Organizing Institute, Director of Roots Camp, a friend, a hero of mine, to the stage. Welcome to the Good Fight, Jamie.
Very glad to be here.
I'm glad that you're here too. So Jamie, what is this thing?
This thing called Roots Camp. First of all, I need to commend you on the indoctrination of the youth.
Thank you. We recruit.
It's amazing. We do too. We're gay. That happens too. So just kidding. No, we don't. Good fight. Roots Camp is this incredible convening, as you were saying, of this year, 2,000 progressives from across the country who are fighting the good fight all across the country in every area possible. What I love most about Roots Camp is that you have people working in labor, you have people working in women's rights, you have people in the LGBTQ community, everyone coming together and sharing their best practices. That's, to me, what Roots Camp is about. To some, what Roots Camp is about is realizing they have a community that they didn't know they had. There was a young woman here, she's about 24 years old, last year, who came up to me and told me that she was really pushing for women's choice efforts in Kentucky. And that can obviously be a very tough fight and a very uphill fight. And she didn't realize there was anyone else, even from her region, that was doing similar work. Huh. So here she comes to Roots Camp and not only finds a few local folks who are doing the same work, but a national community of support.
It is this extraordinary thing, especially if you live someplace other than like New York or DC or San Francisco or a few other places, right. Madison, where I grew up. But for so many people across the country, they have very strongly held convictions and they think that they're alone. Yeah. You know, they think that they're the only person who cares about stuff and wants to fight and change it. And finding that you're actually part of a big family, like the kind of familial feeling that you find here is just this revelation. And a part of what I want to do with the Good Fight actually is to help people who aren't here present physically right now to feel that love spreading from this room and this place, because we're all part of this movement together.
Yeah, it's a pretty incredible experience to be here and to have the privilege to stand up in front of 2,000 folks who are doing such incredible world-changing work. And to see them smiling and to see them understanding and feeling all these same things together at the same time, and most importantly, sharing their best practices and saying, hey, we failed here, but we succeeded here, and this is why we failed, and this is why we succeeded, so we can take all that work and take it back to our own states, to our own communities, and make those changes on a local level, and then come back next year and share those best practices all over again. Another great thing I love about Roots Camp is that it's an unconference. It's not, there's no set agenda.
I realized that all these people who've learned how to be amazing advocates and how to win things, they learned it right here.
Yeah, what's interesting, there's a gentleman that is he works on the right, and he quote unquote infiltrated Roots Camp last year and tweeted about it a lot. And he led a session this year. We put it right up on the wall because I personally wanted to know what he had to say. And what's interesting to me is that he started out by saying that the right doesn't understand that our movement is not about the corporate dollars that you put in it. It's not, I mean, I'm misquoting entirely. It's not about the cash, it's about the people.
Yeah.
And that's not something I don't think that can be taught the way that you need to teach it to actually bring those people together. In the progressive community, we work from our hearts. We work because we know this is the right thing. And we just did a session on how to stay in the movement and how to, longevity. And it's really hard to do sometimes when 24/7, the work you do and the life you live at home is one that is based on who you are as a human being, essentially.
Your fundamental values and your identity.
Yeah, so that's what you spend, your 9-to-5 job doing, and then you come home and you can't put that away. You can't, anywhere else you work or a lot of other places you work, you can't just leave it on the shelf, go home, spend time with your kids and family. It's very different. You can't change the person you are fundamentally at the end of the day of work.
Well, let me wrap by just asking, you're here for the first time as a married man at Rootscamp.
Yeah, I am.
Tell us the story of that.
Thank you very much. So I was actually putting together a rally down in D.C. I lived in New York at the time, a rally to fight Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I was going to some gay bars and handing out flyers to get people to come to the rally. And a young man came up to me and he said, "You're not from here, are you?" And I said, "How can you tell?" And he said, "You're carrying a big gay Metro D.C. map." Which I was. It had little rainbow flags over all the gay bars.
Actually gay.
Actually a gay map.
Yes.
It was not having sex with men at the time, but anyway, he spent the rest of the night handing out flyers with me, and we spent the next year living long distance and doing that, and then we did a training. We did a LGBT new media boot camp training at NOI. The New Organizing Institute, and we didn't actually meet doing that training, which NOI would not like to think. They like to sell the story as we're an NOI couple, which we pretty much are. So anyway, now I put together Rootscamp. He's worked on it with me for 3 years in a row. He puts together the wall, which is our agenda. And I got to get in front of the crowd last year at this time and tell everyone my personal story, a lot of which I just told you. And this year I got to come back and say, now he put a ring on it.
Yay!
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
Awesome.
With a shout out to Beyonce, who stole all our press yesterday by dropping an album.
I know. But I think she would be here if she hadn't dropped her album yesterday.
Absolutely. We had like 2 sessions about her, which is amazing.
So Beyonce, your marriage, and the secret sauce for progressive victories across the country, all happening right here at Rootscamp. I love it. Jamie McGonigal, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Ben Wikler.
Jamie McGonigal, first time appearance on The Good Fight, twice a guest on The Flaming Sword of Justice, our predecessor program, and definitely a future friend of pretty much all of us and all the things that we care about. We come now, we were talking about how Rootscamp gives the inside story of the sort of strategies and tactics that went into a lot of the wins and the losses and the fights that people hear about across the country. Our next segment is kind of like a Rootscamp reduction, a Rootscamp reduction. It is a distilled Rootscamp. It is a review of wins and losses and in-betweens across the country. It is called the Win Report. And it's about to start now. We are joined by Garland Gilchrist II of MoveOn.org and Bridget Todd of the New Organizing Institute here on the stage at the first live Good Fight. Let's give it up for these folks. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. All right. So, what is the Win Report, Garland?
So the Win Report, Ben,
Things are good or bad. And then we will run the tally and figure out how we should feel based on the evidence, not just,
what Gretchen says. Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay, let's begin in Uruguay. In Uruguay, there's this amazing president, Pepe Mujica. He was a sort of a leftist guerrilla for a long time. He was jailed for 14 years. And then he was released, and he's now the elected president of the country, and he's this incredibly kind of peaceful, progressive guy. He's supported same-sex marriage in Uruguay. It's legal now. He's legalized abortion, which was illegal there, and saved a lot of lives in the process of women's lives. And now, this week, the legislature passed. He signed into law the legalization of marijuana in a country for the first time on this planet. Woo! It's a pretty major deal.
Ben, that is huge. It is a strike against the just complete and utter failure of the war on drugs, a war that has decimated communities across this country, but also just communities and countries around the world. It's decimated governance in Uruguay, for example. And that's one of the reasons why the president has been so fervently against, drug war policies. And so I think it's great, and I think this is something that we will be able to see in other countries around the world as they see that, this policy is problematic. We should get rid of these types of prohibitions.
Yeah, he's never used marijuana in his life, but he said the policy of prohibition has failed for 50 years. Look at what's happening in Mexico. There are countries around the world that are basically dominated by drug cartels. This is a governance issue, and it's an experiment. I think it's going to be fascinating to see what happens, and it is a step away from an insane system. So that kicks us off. Over to you, Bridget.
So I have a really great win. Yay. So this is what Joe Biden would call a BFD. You might know what that means. So how many of you guys have heard, or how many of y'all have heard of Nina Pollard? Anyone?
Judge Nina Pollard.
Woo! Yeah, so she was just appointed to the D.C. Court of Appeals, which is huge. It's the second highest court in the country, so it's a BFD. And really, I mean, she is this staunch fighter for civil rights, and she has been a landmark judge in all of these cases that fight for equality and for the rights of women and people of color. And she is great. And she could be our next notorious RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Awesome.
If y'all have never heard that, you can steal that. I saw it on a shirt.
Great shirt.
Feel free to take it.
And this is only possible because of filibuster reform. So she was somebody who was filibustered by Republicans. She's like eminently qualified. She argued two of the biggest civil rights cases of the last few decades at the Supreme Court and won them. And they filibustered her. And she would not have been appointed to the bench if it hadn't been for this massive campaign, Fix the Senate, which MoveOn was a part of, and a lot of different groups here at Rootscamp. They changed the rules, and now there's a new judge on the bench.
That's a huge win. Unfortunately, and now I'm going to take you to my home state of Michigan for what is a downer. So the state of Michigan, the legislature is led by Republicans, and they passed legislation that basically made it illegal for private or public insurance plans to cover abortion services. They basically made it so if you want to have health insurance that will cover any sort of services related to abortion, you need to buy it separately and buy it before you get pregnant. Now that's really problematic because in cases of rape or incest, when you don't expect those things to happen to you, but then you get pregnant because of it, if you don't have this insurance beforehand, you're out of luck in the state of Michigan now. And what's really even more sinister about it is the Republicans passed it in a way that the Republican governor cannot veto it in the same way that he vetoed this same legislation last year. So this is an opportunity for organizing in Michigan because this is a huge loss.
Yeah, this is a win that needs to happen. So all of y'all in the audience need to get mad and make a lot of noise on this issue because this is a win that needs to happen.
Absolutely.
Michigan, That's what I have to say about that. I'm from Wisconsin, so I sometimes feel that way anyway.
Right.
So,
very insightful.
while we're on the subject of giant downers, we have to look around the world to India and Australia, because there has been, as folks have been involved in, including our own Jamie McGonigal, this amazing support for equality for all, in marriage equality and the right of people to their bodies what they will as consenting adults. But in Australia, the Supreme Court just struck a provincial law that allowed same-sex marriage, so they made it illegal across the country. And in India, the Supreme Court just overturned a lower court decision and made gay sex illegal in India. They restored a law from the 1860s put in by the British colonial rulers in India. And in both countries, there are these, there's an uproar right now. It is a huge step backwards.
I mean, not only are these laws problematic because they're just homophobic and disgusting, but how do you enforce that?
Man, you do terrible things. Like in the U.S., the Lawrence versus Texas was like a police officer who was called and arrived as some adults were in bed together, and then decided to throw the book at them and charge them under sodomy laws. And it's just like this insane way of just throwing an extra bit of hate magic on people who aren't doing anything wrong. So there are people organizing now in these countries, in India and in Australia. There are amazing movements there that need our solidarity to support them in this fight. And in Australia, there's a group called Get Up that made my favorite marriage equality video. You might have seen it on Upworthy with the headline, "If this video makes you uncomfortable, you make me uncomfortable."
Yes.
That video is great, but clearly the Supreme Court hasn't watched it. So we need to do what we can to help our friends. We are as a country, so I think that's a win.
Totally.
Absolutely. And so now I got to win because I want to be like Bridget and actually talk about wins. So in San Francisco, they have a law that basically bans plastic bags at the grocery store. But it doesn't ban them. It just says that if you want to get a plastic bag when you go to the store, you need to pay a little fee. And you know who really hates that law? Big companies that run grocery stores like Safeway and the Grocery Manufacturers Association, which is their really disgusting lobbyist organization. And they fought this tooth and nail because they wanted to say that it's going to be so hard on people to have to use reusable bags, and we're going to have to charge them more money. And they basically lied about it, and they've been fighting tooth and nail in the courts. Well, the California Court of Appeals rejected that argument. They said that, you know what, quote, San Francisco can ban all the plastic bags that it wants. This is a win for local governance. This is a win for the environment, because these terrible plastic bags, they contribute to all sorts of waste in the ocean. They are just really terrible for our planet. And now people beat these corporations that tried to fight them in court. They passed these laws, and other cities across the country already have them, and I think we'll see more of them with this emboldened court victory.
You know, people talk about there being 5 continents or 6 continents if they forget Antarctica. There is a 7th continent in the Pacific called the Garbage Patch. It is a huge patch of plastic pollution that is basically plastic bags that have swept out into the sea and are killing massive amounts of wildlife. It is gross. And plastic bag bans are a way to fight back against it. I think it's awesome.
Totally.
I have one little nugget to tack on here. You know, our competitor, our would-be competitor in the broadcasting arena is something called Fox News Channel. And yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And, you know, they're jealous of the good fight, and it's amazing, beautiful audience. But they're plugging away, and Megyn Kelly just took over the 9 p.m. primetime spot on Fox News, moving Sean Hannity to 10 p.m., and she has come out swinging, attacking the diversity and beauty of real Christmas. This is something that she said on her program.
And by the way, for all you kids watching at home, Santa just is white, but this person is just arguing.
Santa just is white, she announced to kids. Now, Bridget, was Santa white when you were growing up?
My Santa was a person of color.
Garland, did you have a white Santa in your home?
If a white Santa knocked on my door, he got turned away.
My parents would have been very suspicious of white Santa.
And the thing about Santa is that, you know, Santa is actually your parents. I'm sorry to give this away, but not everyone has white parents. You know what I mean?
She doesn't know that.
She doesn't realize that. She thinks all parents are white, like her parents. I don't know, man. There's a war on Christmas being waged, and it is not from our side in this fight, I think. So that is a note of concern. It is time now for the tally.
The tally.
The tally.
Nailed it.
Beautiful. All right. Uruguay, first country in the world to legalize marijuana. Okay, folks, we need your help with this. We need you to say win or like loss or boo if something is bad. Okay, so Uruguay. Win.
Oh, Pallard, Supreme Court.
Win.
Michigan. This is the only time I'll ever let people boo Michigan.
India and Australia. That's a double boo.
Bridget on Saturday Night Live, or someone who looks like her.
Yes.
San Francisco can ban all the plastic bags that it wants.
Win. And Megyn Kelly declaring that Santa in all households for all time is a white person.
Fail.
So if you add that up, Gretchen has actually plugged this into the massive data centers that the NSA runs in Utah, and it looks like there are 4 wins, there are 4 losses. This is a tie week, a tipping point week. It is balanced right on the cusp, and all of you Roots campers and all of you listeners out there need to go out into the world and fight back so that we can have another progressive week next week instead of this ridiculous draw.
Absolutely.
Do it.
Get to work.
All right, folks. Bridget Todd, Garland Gilchrist II of MoveOn.org and New Organizing Institute in reverse respective order. Thank you for joining us for the Win Report.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Our first ever live Win Report here from Rootscamp 2013 in Washington, D.C. I'm Ben Wikler. This is The Good Fight. And we come now to today's epic story. So the epic story is where we go, as we say, behind the slingshot in a David versus Goliath battle. And this is a particularly vicious Goliath that we're facing. I'm going to be joined now by Rashad Robinson, Executive Director of Color Change, a renowned nationwide advocate for equality on many fronts, for rights for everybody. Thank you for joining us, Rashad.
Thanks for having me.
It is so great to have you. So, I heard about ALEC when I was a kid, actually. It's been around for a while. And I just remember hearing that Republicans were introducing these bills that they didn't write that were bad. And it seemed like there was some kind of conspiracy out there, but no one really knew anything about it. But you know about it. You know where these laws came from. So today's story, I should just say, is a story in 3 acts.
That they would
So
pass.
like cute, beautiful,
Yes, like
camera-friendly,
Naomi Campbell, Tyra Banks, models.
except legislation.
But legislation. And so they would create these laws and get them passed at the local level. They would bring these corporations and state legislators into rooms to sort of incubate what they thought were best practices, policies that sort of helped corporations achieve their goals. So Coca-Cola would be in the room with ALEC to pass what they called to sort of end what they called the discriminatory soda tax. Or the privatized prison industry would be in with ALEC to push for mandatory minimum legislation, or the Arizona immigration law. Or we would see, many of the biggest banks inside of ALEC pushing for all sorts of financial policy or deregulation that would put our communities in harm's way. And so they were doing this for 40 years. Over the last 10 years, really, ALEC got really successful in passing these laws. And we saw even in some places, like in Florida, where a state legislator introduced the ALEC bill and didn't even take the ALEC heading off the top of the page. And so it was really this sort of underground pipeline where corporations put their money into ALEC, then ALEC sort of pushes it to state legislators, and then these state legislators go into state houses and don't disclose that they're working with ALEC, that ALEC has written these laws, and they pass all sorts of laws on a wide range of issues.
You know, model legislation can be nice if it's pro-public interest, and there's like good advocates and think tanks that say, wouldn't it be great if you passed a bill that required that confessions be videotaped when in police interrogations? Things like that are fine, but this is like not people trying to figure out how to serve the public. This is companies saying this will help our bottom line. Is that right? Do I understand that right?
Yeah, so our problem in and of itself is not model legislation, right? State legislatures all around the country are oftentimes part-time. In many states, state legislators work, very few days out of the year and make a really small salary. And so the idea that they're going to be creating a whole lot of laws that are going to sort of move their state forward, is probably going to be a bit challenging. And so the idea that there are entities that help create these laws, we don't necessarily have a problem.
Yeah.
The challenge was the secrecy of ALEC by bringing these corporations and these state legislators into back rooms that were not public, where media was not invited, where they were spending a whole lot of money, not disclosing sort of these relationships when they went back to the states to pass these laws is really the problem. Circumventing sort of democracy, circumventing our elections, really circumventing what people expect out of the folks that they send to their state capitals to do the people's business.
So where did ALEC's money come from?
It came from these corporations. So these corporations, as well as some of our biggest foes, like the Koch brothers and others, they 98% of ALEC's money came from corporations, and many of them public-facing, the Walmarts, Coca-Colas, Crafts of the world.
Tobacco companies,
a lot of utilities and bank companies, a lot of organizations in the food industry. ALEC would consistently create new lines of work to sort of tap into new industries. And so they would started seeing their work around privatized prisons go down, and so they started working with the bail bonds industry and the industry that sort of produces surveillance equipment like bracelets and others. So they would start saying, well, we don't want people in prison forever, but we want to extend probation and paroles now so that we can actually make money off of surveillance. And so all of these things that they were doing were really both in the interest of growing and advancing ALEC, but advancing an agenda that was about corporate control of our democracy and our lives.
And so which side were you supporting or opposing them then?
So we were we were opposing. You
Oh,
know,
that
we
would've
were
been
opposing
really
ALEC,
awkward.
Yes.
Okay,
I mean,
great.
Color of Change is the only national civil rights organization, national black civil rights organization that doesn't take corporate money.
Huh.
And so, as an organization that does not take corporate money, we've made a real decision as an organization to hold corporations and political leaders accountable, having both of these sort of twin sort of accountability levers as part of our theory of change, of that in order to really shift and change the way that black folks and their allies of all races get to experience this world, we need to hold these sort of both of these powerful entities accountable.
Folks in the audience, does that seem like a good idea? Holding corporations and politicians accountable? Okay, I think you have the people on your side on this one then Rashad. That's good.
That's good to know. It's good to know.
So how did ALEC get into the voter suppression game?
So, ALEC got into the voter suppression game because, many of their corporations needed to change the voting pool, right? If as we looked at this past election, the rising American electorate, the coalition of black folks and brown folks and young people and senior citizens and women that elected and re-elected Obama, this coalition really had the potential to make huge changes on a wide range of issues, from economic policy to criminal justice policy, all the things that ALEC feared. And so, if you're not going to necessarily
Actually working. And against this group that had 97%, 98% corporate cash in the truckloads, came this organization that probably had slightly fewer truckloads of cash, but maybe more actual people involved. How do you come into this picture?
So we came into this picture as we were seeing these voter ID laws pop up around the country, and we were trying to think about what do we do as an organization that cares about black folks and their allies voting. What do we do to stop these voter ID laws? And we started meeting with many of our allies, the Advancement Project, CAP, many organizations that had been sort of writing or researching or working to push back against voter ID laws. And we realized very quickly that there was no theory of change on pushing back against these laws politically, right? For instance, as an organization with nearly 900,000 members at the time, black folks and their allies, we were sort of in this position these Tea Party legislators and governors weren't going to necessarily listen to a bunch of black folks upset about voter ID laws. They had passed those laws, right?
I'm from Wisconsin, and it's totally controlled by Republicans right now, like Michigan, and the Republican legislators do not care if people mass in the streets and protest them.
Yes.
They're delighted.
So we were sort of the sort of moment to movement sort of action holding political leaders is not going to work for us. It's not the lever that we can pull. And so then we started researching, how do these laws get in place in the first place? And all the kind of fingers started pointing at ALEC and the 26 states that sort of ALEC had moved these laws into place. And we started researching ALEC. And we had not spent a lot of time working on ALEC. Color of Change at the time was about 5-6 staff people. We had some really solid victories in sort of corporate accountability, the Glenn Beck campaign and others. But
Can I just say,
yes.
Color of Change helped get Lou Dobbs and Glenn Beck off the air. Folks, if you can recognize, it's an extraordinary thing.
So we were engaged in that type of advocacy. But we started researching ALEC, and we came across a number of organizations that had been spending a lot of time researching, holding legislators accountable. Our friends at the Center for Media and Democracy had done amazing research, and Lisa Graves was, incredibly brave in both putting that information public on ALEC Exposed, which gave my campaigners and team really some time to research.
ALECexposed.org. Check it out.
ALECexposed.org, and really research and think about sort of what we were going to do. And then there were organizations like Progress Now, People for the American Way, and Common Cause and others that had been sort of spending a lot of time really sort of working and pushing against ALEC. We decided that our angle was going to be the corporations. This is where we had a lot of success. 98% of ALEC's money comes from corporations. So these corporations who every single day came to black folks and say, buy our products, use our services, were now putting their money into this vehicle that was preventing black people from being able to vote. And so we started, similar to how we start other camper campaigns, with behind-the-scenes conversations. We picked 15 to 20 corporations to start off with, and we sent them letters trying to laying out what ALEC's agenda was, how it was harming black folks, who Color of Change was, and sort of kind of channeling, but not directly, what a public campaign was. But at this point, just simply asking for conversations.
So you're an executive at Coca-Cola, and you're funding ALEC so that you can, basically get more kids to drink sugar water. And then you get a letter from a civil rights group saying, hey, you're also funding voter suppression. Would you like to talk to us about that?
Yes. And they started talking to us. And we would call, sometimes we'd have to push, we'd get on the phone with government affairs executives, like the vice president for government affairs, the vice president for social responsibility, and they would say things to us like, we fund both sides. We fund the right and we fund the left. And we would say, this is not really a political conversation. This is a moral conversation. There's not really two sides to black people voting.
We fund this voter suppression and
Yes.
we fund the voter registration.
So
And
not
we
really-
don't have a position on whether people should be, denied the ballot.
Yeah. And then they would, the next call would generally end with they would bring some sort of senior level black person inside of their corporation. They would get them on the phone, and I would tell stories about voting with my grandfather, and they would tell stories about voting with their grandfather. And I was on the phone with the guy from Kraft, and I was like, black folks like macaroni and cheese, and a public campaign could not be really good right about now. And we had many of those conversations, like conversations with Coca-Cola, where we'd say, an organization that has 900,000 folks, might have a good number in Atlanta, where you're public, where both Coca-Cola is and where they fund Civil Rights Museum, and that this could be tricky for you all.
Just letting you know.
Just letting you know. And so we had these back and forth behind the scenes conversations while we publicly had a conversation with our members about corporate funded voter suppression. At the time, we did not name any corporations. We simply started sort of doing base building and power building with our members, trying to get folks engaged. And
To part 3 of this story.
Yeah.
It's time now for the taste of victory. The groundwork has been laid, the conversations have been had, the executives have been educated, the public has been engaged. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people know now that voter suppression isn't just a Republican agenda, it is a corporate-funded initiative introducing these bills into states across the country, and you're about to go public. What happened next?
What happened next was tragedy. It was bad, and it was the tragedy in Sanford, Florida. And it was a moment for our membership, and a moment where our organization, as a small organization, collectively went to mobilize our members to fight for justice for Trayvon Martin. And hundreds of thousands of our members stood up and pushed for the Justice Department to step in Sanford when we saw that the local police department could care less about justice, when we saw that investigations were not happening the way they should. And our membership was solidly sort of working on that for weeks. And people were wondering why George Zimmerman wasn't behind bars. What was this sort of stand your ground law? And we were talking about it. And then Media Matters and the Center for Media and Democracy published a report showing that the stand your ground law was in fact an ALEC law. And so now we have these hundreds of thousands of members who are fighting for justice for Trayvon. And we've got these members who are fighting corporate-funded voter suppression funded by ALEC. And all roads lead to ALEC. And it was at that moment that we decided that we had spent enough time giving these corporations sort of notice. We had updated them on the role of Stand Your Ground and ALEC, and it was time to start moving to a public sort of execution. And we decided to go with Coke first. And we gave Coke 48 hours.
This is Coca-Cola, not the Koch brothers who cannot
Not
be
the
shamed,
Koch brothers, yes.
but Coca-Cola.
And so we gave them 48 hours. We sent them a website, a behind-the-scenes website, a link with their logo on it, talking about it, even sharing that how much time we had spent going back and forth with them. And we said we would go public both to the media and start having our members call. And Coca-Cola ignored us. The 48 hours passed, and we started hitting send. And 5 hours later, Coca-Cola called us and said that they were leaving ALEC and to please stop having our members call them.
Folks, that is extraordinary. That after they resisted for so long. that they turned on a dime when the pressure started really coming?
You know, I think one of the powers, the pieces of this that's really important, and we'll talk about this as we close, is that the importance of both the behind the scenes and the public conversation. Giving folks inside of Coca-Cola who may have been on our side enough time to build up power, to be able to push and push against the forces inside the corporation that may not have been on our side. That the first contact they got from us was not a public outreach, but they had had a lot of time. And so by the time we actually went public and they saw, in fact, that we would go public, the folks inside the corporation who I think could have been on our side were supported now by folks on the outside who were actually pushing. And so that sort of is a strategic lever that I think is really important. It's been important for us in Glenn Beck and other campaigns as well.
Yeah, so often people think of like a target government or corporation or office or whatever as being one entity, but it's actually all these corporations are people, my friends, and there's all these different people that often disagree, and you want to support your allies in winning the internal argument, and they need you to be pushing from the outside so that they have a leg to stand on.
Absolutely. And so after we went after Coke, there was momentum, and so we started. So we wanted the domino effect. We never wanted to lay out a bunch of corporations. We knew that if we could sort of push energy at individual corporations, also playing industries off of each other, we could start creating enough domino effect where other corporations, seeing the writing on the wall, would leave without us having to even go after. Color of Change, was a much smaller organization at the time, and still a very, very small organization.
How many people do you have now?
Right now, we have 18 staffers.
How many people does Coca-Cola have?
I don't even know.
It has. I think it has 100,000 in Africa alone, which means more than 100,000 total. Yeah.
Yes.
So you're taking on some of the biggest corporations in the world in a way.
Absolutely, and trying to find the right ways to sort of utilize our strategic insight and media savvy and amplifying the voices of our membership to sort of break through forces that seem like no one can break through.
Yeah. You're finding individual cracks and going after those rather than throwing yourself against the wall.
And so the media started covering the story, and corporations. I was on MSNBC the next day, and Kraft had released a statement saying that they were staying with Alec, and so I, much to the chagrin of my staff on air, said, "Well, Kraft is next," and my staff is watching now, trying to now put together the next outreach on Kraft, which wasn't the decision. But before we could get it out the next morning, Kraft decided that they were going to leave. So maybe there was a rogue executive there. Over the course of the next couple of weeks, along with our allies at the Center for Media and Democracy, People for the American Way, Progress Now, Common Cause, Credo, and then other organizations had to actually officially leave Alec, even though they thought they had left a year ago.
That's amazing.
And that's also the power of having that behind the scenes, those behind the scenes conversations and that back and forth.
How many corporations fell in this period?
So in this period right here, we were at about 15 corporations when Alec decided they were gonna stop working on voter suppression and gun laws. That they said that they were gonna get out of that business and they were gonna end those committees, and they had hoped that was gonna stop the coalition. And our message at Color of Change was that Alec essentially went out into the water and spilt a bunch of oil. And then they said, well, you know what, now that we're caught, we're not going to spill any more oil, but we're not going to clean it up. And so people were going to be heading into election with these voter ID laws. People are still living in communities with these stand your ground laws that Alec had put in place. And these model bills that they wrote were still going to be used by state legislators. It wasn't like they were going to pull back all the paper from everyone and the paper wasn't going to exist with the model laws on them. So to the extent that they had already done their damage, they were not off the hook, and certainly the corporations that were, coming for black folks' money by day, but taking away our vote and making us safe by night, were not sort of off the hook either. And those corporations had to still make a decision: do we stand with Alec, or do we stand with a customer base that we've spent a lot of money cultivating and building over the years?
And what did they choose? So what do you like? So,
So
you make that decision. They try to like pull back. They try to get out of this fight, and you're like, no, this fight is still on. You started this thing, and
corporations continue to leave. And all through this process, Alex said that the coalition that was working on this wasn't successful. They said that we'd overstated the numbers of corporations that had left. They said that that they weren't in financial distress, even as Roll Call reported that they had to close down their DC office and move out to Virginia to some smaller space. They kept saying that over and over again, but we've recently had a story coming out of The Guardian that is very clear in terms of the impact on ALEC. A $1.4 million, potentially even upwards of $2 million budget shortfall, a hole in their budget in terms of
a third of their budget.
A third of their budget or more. And this is by their own documents. And we know from just our experience with them that their own documents are never tell and paint the full story of both their sort of impact in putting people in harm's way or the impact of our campaign. They've lost hundreds and hundreds, upwards of 300 state legislators. They've lost upwards of 100 corporations by their own documents. We were only thinking they were somewhere between 50 or 60.
Wow. So there were more than double the number of corporations that you thought you'd gotten to leave left ALEC. They didn't want to touch them.
And they've created a sort of this list of corporations that they wanted to go back to called Prodigal Son Project, which they didn't spell correctly. But but they created this project to sort of go back to these corporations and say, come back to ALEC. It was so great before when Color of Change was going after you. Maybe you want one more dance. And we've, with our allies and coalition partners, sent out letters to these corporations letting them know that Color of Change is still around and still ready to hit send, still ready to mobilize, still ready to push. And if these corporations still have a choice, they have every right to join in with ALEC. We made a strategic choice. Many of our partners did amazing work, like protesting with ALEC and really going after ALEC. We made a choice where we consistently said, ALEC can do whatever it wants. We know what ALEC stands in terms of issues impacting black folks and our allies. We know that they would rather support policies that put our community in harm's way than uplift our community, and we get that. The question always is for these corporations who come into our communities and say, buy our products and use their services, where are you at? What is the choice that you're gonna make? And so for us, that was really sort of one of the key areas where sort of we really put our energy, and we've continued to say that. And so, as we sent out that letter, the phones at Color of Change were going off, and the emails were coming back from corporations saying, no, just so you know, we're not going back. You could call us directly. You don't have to send us letters.
So they're scared off. This is, it's such a huge thing. This is this kind of Koch brother and corporate funded shadowy right-wing network that was having this bigger and bigger influence on states across the country is now actually on the run, on its heels, because of a people-powered movement that's stood on principle and went where the money was, challenged these supporters of it. That's really an extraordinary shift in where the power lies.
It's an extraordinary shift. It's an extraordinary shift for communities believing that they have the power to push back when powerful forces pass laws or put things on the table that are going to impact them in negative ways, that they believe that they can organize and push back and hold powerful entities, much bigger entities, accountable, and being able to have moments for us as progressives, for us as people in this movement where we can stand up against the And absolutely, and I think some of the long-term impacts for us is that we have a shorthand, right, in terms of certain type of laws, corporate-funded laws that don't come from the people. We now have an ALEC shorthand around these laws to both push back and open up new space. The work that our friends, at Progress Now and others did specifically on the legislative piece and pushing legislators out is tremendous, right? Because, legislators, some of these legislators, especially in sort of the culture that we live in our state governments and our national government, where there's so few moderates, where we're so polarized, forcing and pushing so many to leave ALEC and realizing that it wasn't in their best interest to be associated is also tremendous. And being able to use sort of the kind of pop cultural significance of a corporate campaign, right? The Coca-Colas and the Walmarts and these big companies saying we are not going to be associated with voter ID laws. We're not going to be associated with stand your ground or shoot first laws. That is a sort of a really powerful piece for us. And I think the other piece is that, this fight is not over.
Yes.
Right? We will continue. ALEC has an agenda for 2014 in our states. And we've got work to do to both push back against that agenda, but also use this moment to pivot and push for the aspirational policies that we want to see in our communities, to utilize sort of what this moment means, not just to fight back and win, but to push forward more aspirational policies that not just keep our communities out of harm's way, but give our communities the type of support economically within their communities from a policing and criminal justice space that makes for a better life.
So let's wrap with one call to action. What can people do right now who are listening to this, who are here in this hall at Rootscamp in 2013? What can people do to take action on this fight?
Yeah. So, we push back against ALEC, but these folks still are working, and they've still worked to trying to pull new corporations in. And so, we still need folks to join this effort, to join the campaign, so that as we continue to push levers and ask people to call corporations, to show up to targets, to go to shareholders meetings, to take over Facebook pages, all of those things requires a base. Having an organized constituency of black folks and allies of all races was key, I think the most significant piece to this campaign. And so we need you to join us. And you can ask your friends, your family, your neighbors through social media to join us. And the easiest way probably here is through our short code. And you can text ALEC to 225568. Maybe we can repeat that back to me, right?
225568?
225568. And you're going to text ALEC, and that will be how you can both join the campaign and push others to join this campaign. To push back against this organization, but also to give us the strength and the people power that will allow us to push for the things that we want in the states as well.
Awesome. And Google, Facebook, and Yelp have just joined ALEC. So this fight goes on, and we got to push back.
Absolutely.
225568.
225568.
Those numbers are just music to my ears. Folks, Rashad Robinson, Executive Director of Color of Change, here from the Good Fight live at Rootscamp 2013. We are going to close now. I'd like to ask our Good Fight team to join us here on the stage as we wrap with our closing credits today. Thank you to Lauren Ellen McCann, our executive producer extraordinaire, who made not one but two amazing episodes of the show this week alone. Garland Gilchrist II of MoveOn.org joins us each week for the Win Report and champions the causes of justice across this country. In the meantime, Bridget Todd of the New Organizing Institute has been here with us.